absolutely delighted to be able to share the conversation that I'm about to have. It's with one of the most leading and pioneering yoga teachers of the Western world. Though I've been practicing yoga since I was 12, I never had an actual yoga teacher. That is, until 5 years ago, which is when I met this unique yogini. Though American, from Los Angeles, she embodies the true essence of the teachings of ancient India. She also espouses the qualities of what it means to be a world citizen. I've been so inspired by her that in the last 5 years since I've met her, not only has my yoga practice gone through the roof, but she's also trained me to become a yoga teacher. Let's meet Shiva Rea. So Shiva, thank you so much for taking the time, because I know we're in the middle of a very deep, intensive training here, and I wanted to grab a few minutes with you to talk about a few things that you talk about in this book. It's called Tending the Heart Fire, and I have so many questions. The first one is, what is heart fire?
So the thing that fascinated me is, of course, we always hear the jyotir, the inner light of consciousness from yoga. And then for my own ancestral background, my grandmother was like a mystic Catholic, and I would often come, to see my grandparents, and she would be resting on her bed with her rosary, and I actually have inherited her picture of Jesus with the flaming heart of Jesus. And here's this heart fire. Mm-hmm. So certainly kind of in the iconography or in the world's spiritual cultures, the thing that has fascinated me is that there's not one place in my research where I could find a different metaphor of the nature of the heart, and how this is now finally coming full circle in this transformation of our understanding of our energetic heart. And so what I wanted to map in the book is a kind of a cross-cultural understanding of the heart fire, and that we're not meaning a literal fire, obviously, but that as you have an experience of both your heart organ, which has always from ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, also been visualized as a fire because of this heat, this sensation that we have in our heart region, particularly as we feel love, or particularly when we feel what I think is clearly in modern language, when we feel our heart shutting down. The absence of sensation is something that is also disturbing, but that I feel like we're adapting to. Mm-hmm. And so the scientific understanding of what's often called now the energetic heart, or this field of cardioenergetics, has actually now in a way scientifically given us the reflection of what is now the heart chakra. And that is that there's this electromagnetic field that extends actually from our heart organ, that is generated uniquely in our body from the cardiac cells, which are unique to the heart organ. Mm-hmm. And actually, would you like me to hold this danda?
That would be helpful, thank you.
Very nice.
Although I have in one interview, I held it for 1 hour.
We have many practice with let your arm rest. But the thing of the cardiac cells, the pacemaker cells that started when we're, in the womb, before the brain was fully formed, and that the nature of the cardiac cells, particularly the pacemaker cells, is that their rhythmic nature, the syncopating nature of the pacemaker cells that create the heartbeat, that there's an actual charge, an electrical charge. We know that everything that is alive has some energetic field that can be measured, but the power of the heart fire is just like the elemental fire, that it has this radiance beyond its core, like the sun. And so the electromagnetic field of the heart now can be measured up to 10 feet, not because that's where it stops, because that's just where the sensing of the current instruments are able to sense. So for me, I think we can feel our heart field, but because from kind of the beginning of modern physics, the shift to the material view of our body, everything that the world's spiritual cultures assign to the intelligence of the heart, the feeling of the heart, the spiritual connection to the heart, basically got cut out in a way. And so we were left with just our heart is a great pump. That's all it is. And I feel like we've all suffered. And I, as a yoga practitioner, I always had this kind of doubt that maybe what I was sensing was somehow something I was making up, or here is this beautiful understanding from the Upanishads, but there's always that kind of Western, which I think is a powerful thing, this kind of analytical questioning. And so I think we're at a very powerful period, this quantum period, where science is reflecting what our ancestors have always known. But the essential part of the fire is that the oscillation of the heart is like a rhythmic conductor for all of the cells in the body. So we know this, when we're anxious, our heartbeat changes. When we're in meditation, which is why meditation is so important for the number one killer in the West of heart disease, is because it really is teaching us, like tending a fire, that our heart is giving us all the time this feedback about kind of the deeper states that we're in. And so it's just like tending an outer fire, tending this modulation from our inner heart, particularly when we're not feeling our heart. To me, that's the journey that I needed to take, and I felt that it's important that we recover our energetic heart. Passing back to you.
Thank you. So, what arises for me when I hear you talk about the heart fire is more about how tending the heart fire, for example. The image of the sun within the heart, the inner light, the inner illumination. And yoga and Ayurveda are very much about actually doing exactly that. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about how we stimulate what we call the ojas and the tejas, the sweetness and the radiance, the inner radiance. Is that what you mean when you talk about the heart fire? Because the way I see it is that we can use the mind and the things we do with our life to be able to then stimulate the heart to function to its optimum. And in doing so, we're actually encouraging the heart to behave in its most magnified, in its most magnanimous capacity then. So can you say something about how we do that? What can people who are not doing yoga, who are going to be watching this, what could they do on a daily basis perhaps?
Right. So the beautiful thing about the science of the energetic heart is it mirrors exactly what we have received. To say what we've received in yoga, of course, is something vast, but still there's this continuity from the Vedas, from the Upanishads, within the Tantras, that those are still the wisdom texts that are still informing yoga today. And the main teaching from the science of the energetic heart is that, and some of us, if you've read the book, or if we've been in a context where we're like in chakra vinyasa, when we're really trying to understand what is a heart chakra, is that it has to do with the coherence of the rhythms of our body, particularly between our brain waves and our heart rhythm. And just very succinctly, in terms of our inner alchemy, if we want to say, or this inner tending, when you're under stress, the first sign of stress is that your thought waves and your heart rhythm are separate. So the question becomes, How do you bring them together? And the most important observation from science, and then of course we know this deeply in yoga, is that when these rhythms, and then of course it continues to the enteric brain, but if we just focus here, that when our brain waves are in sync with our heart rhythm, which some people say like, well, what is that? It's like when you're resting in a hammock and you're just being. Or you look at your cat in the windowsill and they're just being. Or their dogs are just being. Or you see someone, a farmer or a gardener, and you just see this quality that there's this flow to whatever they're experiencing. That state of flow is the optimal functioning for just anything that you could measure, whether it's from, like in India, your BP, your blood pressure, BP, your blood pressure, and your IT, your information technology, meaning like the simple thing we say is like, that thing when hey, we're yoga teachers, right? Okay, we're yoga teachers, we're supposed to be connected to the flow, but when you're trying to leave your house and you can't find your keys, everyone knows that like, oh yeah. And then, you're supposed to have already left. You can never seem to find your keys when you're in that disorganized state, right? It's some kind of something everybody experiences. And then when you just let go, somehow you see that they were always right there. And that is this is what we mean by this optimal functioning, that the fragmented state is really not that helpful for anything. So the simple way, very simple way, in the book it's just a simple 5 steps. The first 3 are like the essential. And one, it can be either by closing your eyes and actually through your inner sensing, direct your inner awareness to your heart. The simplest other ways, you see people do it. We do it when we pledge allegiance in the States. I don't know if you guys do that when you're singing your national anthem.
Oh yeah.
Everyone puts their hand on their heart. So if you touch your heart, it's just the immediate grounding. And I find that like also just in relationships, if you need to say something, if you touch your heart, there's this grounding, this syncopation has occurred. So simple. Gaze, touch, and then also feeling. Feeling, which in yoga is called bhava.
Bhava. I do want to talk to you about bhava. We'll come back to that one just after this.
So it's actually being willing to pause and not go forward until you have that. And the more you live in that space, the more when those natural disorganized moments come, then try not, as soon as you remember, try not to take any more steps forward because they're likely will just spin you around. The wisest thing is actually to just pause, find this alignment, which is a kind of like opening your receptivity. And then what happens from there has a very different quality. It's like a tangible sense of going from being disorganized to moving from this integrated place that actually we all know. And to try and not have that be rare, let that be the everyday state and let the fragmented state be rare. So it's kind of like really reversing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're talking about really being connected to the multidimensionality of who we really are. So these are practical avenues with which to become that by actually thinking about, okay, let me just
move it on down.
Even just the action of doing this and placing your hand on the heart, that immediately then does something. So it's almost like entrainment. I mean, it is entrainment.
It is entrainment, absolutely. It's a lot about, in fact, the subtitle is Living in Rhythm with the flow of life, or the pulse of life. And that, in some ways, it sounds like, oh, what a nice idea. But that's really what it is. And including these times of change when things aren't so settled is kind of being, that's why we've been talking about it, that's why I like to surf, is sometimes the waves are so like, we call it the glassy sets, they're just perfect conditions. And then sometimes you're out there and it's a little rougher, it's not so easy to catch a wave. And most surfers, yes, do we prefer when it's kind of glassy and the wind is perfect, and of course everyone likes optimal conditions, but the rough waves also are great teachers. So it's like Bob Marley, he says, though the road is rocky, it sure feels good to me, right? Like, it's something I love Bob Marley since I was a little girl, and like I think popular music or even deep music, we sometimes get transmissions through music because it comes in through that place where we feel, and these kind of paradoxes of like, though the road is rocky, sure feels good to me. Like that his voice, he's not going into that fragmented thing. And he's not saying that the road is always going to be smooth. But when it's rocky and you keep your, we've been talking about rasa, right? You keep your bhav, you keep your rasa, that you can transform when the waves are rough, so you can still somehow enjoy and receive.
And you become even more accomplished in being able to do that thing, whatever that is, because it's teaching you to learn new ways and actually using deeper capacities within yourself. So talking about bhava, we call it bhav.
Yes.
It's something that is so deeply rooted in the Indian psyche, and I don't find it, not to make anything else wrong, but I don't find it very much outside of that culture.
Right.
So when I was growing up, we were taught to do things, but not just to do them.
Right.
My grandmother would literally make me do something again if I didn't do it with in the right way. Not meaning the right way, but it from the inside.
Right.
So, for example, sitting in front of the shrine.
Right.
And, doing the mantra Om Namah Shivaya. It was the first mantra that I was taught since I could speak, and she was very strict about learning what it means to serve food, or to do a mantra, or to how to serve food, how to receive something, and that's the kind of inequality which I haven't found somewhere else. So what is your challenge? I find it challenging as a teacher, as a yoga teacher. I find it extremely challenging to convey that concept in English.
Right.
Can you talk about your experience of? I see you do that very well, and I still see you finding it challenging. Talk about that, please.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important, like when we see in the global community that there's things that are held in the West, which are kind of being reflected back to India, that are actually positive things, and then there's things that India is giving the world. There's things that are integrated in all different cultures. And I think when you come from the West, you can actually see what you've described, that maybe we did have this bhava, this bhava. I think, when I think of British culture, sometimes it's this pomp and circumstance. You guys got the pomp and circumstance bhav down really good. And then you have that like Benny Hill, Mr. Bean.
Yeah.
Mr. Bean, you got the kind of like slapstick, cheeky bugger kind of bhav very well.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's this kind of accepting the sacredness, right? In a secular culture, we get kind of disconnected that this approach of the sacred is something natural, right? So this is sometimes for us teaching yoga in all these different environments. And then the challenges, we've been talking about this week, is technology, on some levels it is mirroring back these things that we feel. We see people put things up on YouTube of children or elders or amazing athletes, and we're like, wow, in some ways there is this, bhava's translated as sentimentality or mood. But somehow when people come into the yoga space, it's like the place of refuge. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I like to start from is that if you look at babies or you look at animals, bhava is very natural. It's like the ground of being. Or we say it this way, a tiger can never not be a tiger, right? A tiger is always in their tigerness. But we're the strange animals in the animal world where we can be something other than ourselves. Mm-hmm. That we can somehow function while being disconnected from our own essence, right? This is a kind of rasa teaching, right? And so I think as yoga teachers, you have to get comfortable somehow that people are going to arrive in a disconnected way. And it's like our sacred duty to somehow be more connected than the general culture is, because in that moment we're this kind of grounding of connectedness. And so some of it's just the way you hold space or putting the right kind of music.
Like a farmer almost.
Yes, or like, the thing of rasa culture in Indian classical music, the ragas, that if you play the wrong raga at the wrong time of day, right? This is why raga is such a good teacher of bhava. So somehow we have to always feel connected in that kind of artistic way, to feel the moment, to somehow be able to respond rather kind of swiftly. Mm-hmm. Like you don't have 10 minutes to just kind of look at who's there and kind of feel. You have to be able to instantaneously do it, just like artists do. Think of the piano player at
like
they're kind of like what's the zeitgeist. So I feel if you're a yoga teacher and you get interested in helping the culture at large be more connected, and we don't see that as something as a luxury. We see it as connected to how we're going to evolve as a species. We see that as connected to climate change. We see that as the healing in our bodies. How so many things are psychosomatic. They say 70% of what brings people to a hospital is actually something of this fragmentation. Mm-hmm. So I feel as yoga teachers, the main practical thing we can do is actually try and live that way ourselves, so that we're somehow offering that, like when you mentioned your grandmothers. I think our grandparents are often like the memory we have. You walk into your grandparents' house and it was just permeated. And of course they had more time in the day to be permeated. Mm-hmm. So we kind of have to learn to be a little more instantaneously permeated. Yeah. And I think that's what meditation really helps us feel. And so I think that the real key is to stay connected yourself and be able to offer that connectedness even when people are coming in a disconnected way. And the simple thing in vinyasa is, vinyasa means the sequence of consciousness or the actual rhythm of nature. And in Prana Vinyasa, we try and sync people with these deeper rhythms of actual movements of prana. That maybe someone breathes and it's filled with tension. Mm-hmm. So we don't call that as your actual breath. There's actually a breath wave that's deeper than the tension on top that you might experience in your breath. So we encourage people to begin to move. If you keep your breath deep and free, then you're able to offer that back. And then it's just like, how we were when we were kids. Then someone's not breathing fully, then you're kind of offering that full breath. And then like the little cardiac cells, we start to syncopate. And then we just invite people back into the flow that is already there. We don't see people as like, they don't know yoga. We say, everybody has already been born into yoga.
What would you like to say to people who see yoga as just asanas?
Well, we'd have to read from Anandamayi Ma, right? We read it earlier. So I can say it exactly as she says it, to honor her. Right, so Anandamayi Ma, right, that beautiful self-realized yogini. She says, rising, sitting down, walking. In fact, any gesture, meaning like a mudra taken up by the body, is called asana, right? And the reason why it looks like from the outside that yoga is asanas is because we're so, in a way, disconnected from this deeper flow in our body. It looks like that what we're doing has all to do about the body, but I feel like we're just simply recovering consciousness as this continuity that has to always be through our body. And that if we can start to experience this ocean that actually surrounds the embodied part, looks like the yoga asanas, and let that be an entryway really into meditation. And that there's so many forms of meditation. You know, of course, even in seated meditation, mantra, mudra, contemplation, pranayama, kirtan. Kirtan also meaning dance. Dance is an offering. Or, you know, some people that's like, whoa, wait a minute. Seva, right? What happens to our heart when we actually help somebody?
Selfless service.
Selfless service. Or to every day keep transforming our idea that, okay, we live in this little place. We're spinning through this vast universe. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So yoga is really just a path of realizing how extraordinary it is to be alive, really realizing that to our fullest capacity in our life as it is. And asanas are one of the tools. But I think if, as yoga teachers, if even in that context we keep offering this kind of broader definition, not just of yoga, but also of vinyasa, is the sequence of consciousness, meaning when you wake up in the morning till you go to sleep, there's actually this continuity. You know, so in the end, the living of yoga is always, that's why I think it's funny when we say, okay, the yoga off the mat. It's kind of like, there's only been yoga off the mat, like it was never just on the mat, like it was actually always more off the mat. You know, that like even, you know, some of the sadhus, it's, you know, their mat is the earth. It's not, like the mat is not the main event, but, you know, that whatever happens in that kind of private circulation, I think the mat represents when you let go of any other responsibility and you're just now have that freedom to let your attention be only what's happening here and now. I think we need that.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Smita, for everything you're offering, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.